afternoon of poetry at Malvern Books. Thank you all so much for coming. We have two great readers for you today, and I'll go ahead and announce our first reader. Adrienne Drobnies' first book of poetry is Salt and Ashes. She is an Austin native who now lives in Vancouver, Canada, and she's been in residence at the Banff Centre. Her poetry won the 2017 Gwendolyn MacEwen Award and was a finalist for the CBC Literary Award. She has a PhD in chemistry. Welcome, Adrienne.
Thank you so much, Claire, and everyone at Malvern Books, and thank you all for being here today. I'm going to start with a few poems, and then there's going to be something different than what I usually do. Man on the moon, as well as in the moon. I watched the televent in a suffocating Texas classroom while Neil Armstrong descended a ladder onto a shiny surface in a temperature-controlled suit, taking Earth's atmosphere with him. A rabbit in the moon, but not on the moon, lucky to be sucked up into that brilliance, soft foot stroking the cheek of my childhood. Someone back in mission control in a super cool room squawked, "NCC here." Buzz followed next, a real 50s name for a real 60s moment. Michael Collins stayed above in orbit, not to be captivated by rock and dust. Stolen silver brilliance, again in your departure gone, shunting moonlight through a vein, day eating up night beside me on the pillow now. And this next poem is The Sacred You. My old Aunt Myrtle, harder than the hard wood of her name. Any noun can be verb, she said, and set the table for dinner. Green print tablecloth and blue plastic glasses. Grandma Beck's everyday china and Art Deco wedding silver. Acrid smell of polish under my nails. I climbed the crepe myrtle, a child shrouded in its leaves, came face to face with the hard-eyed cicada, scrambled down, not returning, for weeks. Years later, the insect is just a specimen in biology class, with organs large enough to see. Taxus tree, made to bow and bend, yields a poison drug from the botanical trash heap of mold and groaning wood for the canker that moans in the flesh. Okay. Some people in this audience are going to recognize the origin of this poem. It's called Home Before Dark. Then, there is a shifting in the leaves my grandmother recognized, something stalking her. Hot and hungry, both she and the animal afraid, but she bears the dryness in the mouth less well. Stock still in her homemade cotton dress, she makes her way as silently as she can through the piney woods, flat-pointed shoes leaving deer tracks in the dust. Human animals, the ones she feared most, could be nothing but a legend, the black cougar called panther. But everyone knows when a child sometimes disappears into the evening and does not return. Seeing one said to be a bad omen, and she reckoned it true. Tall and willowy, she awaits the spine-severing strike, the same clean blow she has used to slaughter chickens. Would her brother shoot the animal with flashes of light in its eyes after they planted her gutted body in the ground? She walks a little faster, though Russell keeps pace, almost home. And now, In a dream, leather jackets chase me around the gas station, one of them holding a broken bottle, a light bulb hanging from a chain, a fence and a car coming at me. Don't jump over the fence. Months later, I walk past the Shell station on Alcatraz Ave, Oakland at 2 a.m. A jogger grabs me around the neck. Don't say anything. 2 weeks before, the policewoman said at the self-defense class, sometimes a woman's best defense is just a good scream. Practice in your car. I did. Time slows. Unsure if I can turn my head and scream. Heads peer out from windows. Oh shit, the predator hisses and runs off. I'm home late with a head full of rage, but I don't phone the police. A closet, prose writer, about to come out of the closet. And so this is from a novel that I'm working on, which a description I heard recently by another writer talking about the work is autobiographically inflected. The same author said, when you go back to a place you're from, sometimes it feels like you're encountering or being greeted by your younger self. And that certainly felt that way to me today. Just a few blocks from here is a restaurant my parents took me when I was very little, a patio. And there's actually a street I just walked down before the reading again, a part of that street, which is mentioned in this, and all geographical errors are purely due to the author. Anyway. In this passage, the narrator, who has a husband, Daniel, and a small child, Sylvie, has gone back to Austin, where she grew up, to see her old friend, Alan, from graduate school in California. Alan is now a professor at UT and married to Clara. The narrator is struggling with an obsession she has developed with a man she works with, whose name is Mark. The scene begins with a conversation between the narrator and Alan, and then shifts to a scene between her and her father. It then shifts back at the end to the narrator and Alan. Fathers and children. For a long time, Austin was a small town trying hard to leave behind being a small town. But the drop in oil prices in the mid-'80s that fueled recovery in the rest of the country did nothing to improve the Texas economy and left instead a lot of half-renovated houses and streets along with overblown suburbs, until one day the tech boom arrived. The street, it was down an aspiring to chic street that Alan and I went for breakfast at the Pecan Street Cafe. The street was closed to cars and the shops were spaced wide apart. Plank steps led off the dusty, unpaved street. An airy sparseness continued inside the cafe. There were wood plank floors, cane-bottom chairs with curved backs, and square tables with cotton prints to match the curtains tied round the waist. Pecanwood. The trees grew up in my mind, straight trunks, a symmetrical spiral of branches, the saw-edged, linear-veined and pointed leaves full green. I heard the soft dropping sound of ellipsoid fruit on matted grass, the spotty, thin, sweet-filled shells concealed in a rough green husk, peeling like a foreskin. The hard wood of the chair molded my body around it. Alan asked me about my 3-year-old daughter. I believed we could reason with her, though he seemed skeptical. Can you imagine telling her about your life someday, the things that happened to you, what's happening now? If she asked, I guess, or if it seemed like it mattered somehow, she's bound to want to know some of it. Could you tell her the truth? Maybe, I equivocated, but why not? Even at 3, I don't think she sees us as perfect or unfailing. But she kind of has to, Alan argued. Her whole survival depends on you. Maybe sometimes it's better for survival if you don't believe in your parents. But yes, I guess you're right, though we don't really encourage her to believe we're always right. I'd like to think I'd be able to admit everything. After all, what does it cost? I'd like to think I'd be genuinely sympathetic, something that seemed impossible for my father. You can say that now because so far you haven't done the things that go along with that admission, Alan said. It would cost him something. It sounds like when he left your mother, he just tried to put all that behind him, perfectly understandable, if not very laudable. He just sees an abyss and no way to get across it. I suppose if he admitted he was even partly responsible for my being badly treated, he'd be saying that his own father was right, and he was just the bad son his father always said he was. Do you think your obsession with Mark has anything to do with your father? Of course. So he's like your father? Yes, cold. There was a droning chainsaw sound in the background, an annoying leaf blower, an instrument without purpose except to rearrange the disorder. I was tempted to rush to the window to search for the source, the only sound that vibrated in the tense stillness of our interlocked wills. On a kind of impulse, I had requested this. Can we talk? I was willing to try this with my father, but not with my mother, who must still lurk somewhere out there in the world, though I was not sure where exactly. Did I think he might say, maybe I was to blame in some ways? Don't you think I've poured over it 1,000 times, at least, in heart and mind, even if I never said it? Did I have a blind faith such an admission would be liberating? There would be no more seething, no more joking stabs, and glib criticisms, and something long festering would rupture and breathe and finally heal a little. He made a mincing attempt to dismiss the question. I thought we settled that a long time ago. Are you still asking yourself that? The clubby, arthritic fingers of the left hand fiddled with the black stone encased in silver on the right. The legs were crossed, the hands poised to deflect. I investigated the brown and purple cross-hatching on the shirt, just below where it opened to reveal stringy scars slashing away to the side of the neck. What do you want from me? The voice was cold, hard, prepared. I want you to admit you had some responsibility for what happened to me, that you were my father and could have tried to find out what was going on, that you could have tried to get me out of it when I did tell you, that you could have, the words spilled on. But I couldn't have known, but I did try, but you never said. It came back and back and back. I spent a lot of time and money. Ask Erica if you don't believe me. He made a glancing reference to his second wife. After you went away to school, I tried everything I could, but your mother... It was a bit late by then, wasn't it? I spat at him. And your mother always seemed to care very much for you. I knew she hated me and did some awful things to me, but I never thought, what self-serving delusion, I fired back. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. It was inconvenient to know. I made many mistakes, he said, but I never wanted to harm you. I did the best I could. Like when you tried to suffocate me as a joke, laughing while I struggled in panic. Then I saw his eyes lift and brighten as he glanced out at me from his lowered head, smiling quickly, as though we shared a guilty secret. Well, he rose, I don't think I can say any more about this. I don't think you're being fair to me. And I don't think, I measured the words, that you know what it's like to live in constant terror for 17 years. He smiled sourly and left the room, resting heavily on the railing as he climbed the stairs back to bed. So you picked someone like that, but who would have behaved differently, Alan said. He's someone who might have been able to help you and would have liked you enough to want to. It is encouraging to hear you talk about how it is now with Sylvie. You really want to have children, don't you? I said. Yeah, sure, I think I'd be pretty good at it. I think so too, after all your own parents were. That doesn't mean anything. You're doing all right, but you had terrible parents. And my parents were always so wonderful, especially to my brother. Breakfast lingered on through lunch over multiple cups of coffee for me and none for Alan. Then we walked back to the house and he went into work. I went for a long walk down a ravine into the campus till I reached the great lingam of my youth, the tower carved with Hebrew, Greek, and Phoenician alphabets, and the inscription that the truth shall make you free, a conviction I held, but had little evidence for. My father had brought me here in and out of the hot, dark, echoing limestone walls. I continued on to the other side of campus, down Guadalupe. I curved around until I reached a street now called Martin Luther King Boulevard. It was the great dividing line, the dangerous barrier I could not pass when I was 8. Turning left on Pearl Street, I searched each house for a trace of memory until I reached another ravine. The street felt right, but I recognized nothing. There were grand homes, much more stately than I remembered. They had acquired dignity with age. I stepped in front of an unprepossessing duplex, the only one on the street. I had lived in such a place, but there was now no cypresses out from which the tomcat attacked the ankles of friend and foreigner alike. The mulberry tree, if that's what it was, appeared dry. In the back, there was no longer a rotting Ringer washing machine, but there was still 50s lawn furniture with fan-shaped metal chairs. And there was a black tree with a scar of the severed limb that had barely missed crushing me in its fall. The house next to it was new, a gentrified habitat with several units. On the separating wall of this duplex, my father had pressed his ear to guffaw at the comic S&M sex of our neighbors, who otherwise reminded me most of Ethel and Fred from I Love Lucy. Maybe this was the place I had lived in before, maybe not. It was all so long ago. I retraced my steps to Alan's house. I would like to read a couple more poems. And this one is short, relatively short. And I wrote it here, and that's what I'm going to do. In my version of heaven, Alan is lying on one side of me and John on the other. And on each side of them are their earlier wives and lovers next to them. And there is no jealousy where we lie with the scattered detritus of a child's colorful Band-Aid, torn corners of potato chip wrappers, discarded Tosca flyers. But the day is mild, and we laugh all together at those low moans we made in pleasure or pain, and how little it all means now. And this last poem is the last poem in the book. Ghost poem. Ghosts are what went before. We are ghost catchers. I was at my uncle's shack by the lake full of water moccasins, slithery black snakes with yawning white mouths. Water moccasins are ghosts of the stagnant water. They deliver the strange. I remember visiting Emily Dickinson's house and seeing her white dress, her writing table, and the stacks of poems she sewed together. And she knew, who has not found the heaven below will fail of it above. Ghosts walk among us all the time and tread the fields of heaven. I remember a drink called Je ne regrette rien that had champagne and calvados and lemon. I did not regret drinking it. Songs are living ghosts of the breath of the dead and can be intoxicating. This is a poem about the last time you saw your mother. I remember reading Raymond Queneau while sitting on the floor of an apartment in Toronto. Zazie is still kicking ass in the Paris metro, but someone has placed a bomb there to make more ghosts. I remember a party with my roommates in Berkeley. I went to bed, and one of the guests came crashing through the bedroom door, fell on top of me, and passed out. Being dead and being unconscious aren't as different as you might imagine, only in one case, the state is transient and you are still breathing. Ghosts breathe too. In fact, they are breath. I remember singing to my father before he died, "The eyes of Texas are upon you all the livelong day, and I've been working on the railroad." I remember numb fingers on the flute, football games and fights and fifths and freezing feet. Wolverines love beaver meat more than anything else, but you will never see one because they are ghost animals. Sometimes they leave traces of hair high in the trees. Beavers are benign animals engaged only in large engineering projects, symbols of the country I inhabit. Sometimes I forget to remember, and that is when the trouble begins. You can't have opinions about facts, but you can certainly forget them. Ghosts are the memories you forgot, and the people you forgot to remember. There was a day, a very bad day, he said, but only one did. And now, next to the living, ghosts are the ones I love best, and sometimes. Lisa Rosenberg, you're from